A 6-year-old girl was sent to live with her aunt and uncle after losing her parents in a house fire. But when a billionaire spots her being dragged and screamed at in the middle of the street, he steps in and uncovers a heartbreaking truth no one else dared to see. The autumn wind slipped through the cracked windows of room 2B at Hillside Elementary School, stirring the scent of pencil shavings and whiteboard markers. Afternoon light pooled on the scratched linoleum floor, warm and soft, but it didn't reach the back corner of the classroom where Emily sat hunched over her desk. Outside, the low hum of idling school buses blended with the faint laughter of children escaping into the afternoon. Emily Green was not among them. Her sleeve crept down again. She tugged it back over her wrist, pressing the cuff against the faint bruise blooming purple and blue near her elbow. Her other hand twisted the frayed hem of her blouse, an old school uniform, too big at the shoulders, the collar chewed by time, and too many washes. Mrs. Parker glanced up from her desk. The final bell had rung 5 minutes ago, but Emily was still there, silent, as if blending into the shadows might buy her time. "Emily!" The teacher stood, her voice measured, careful not to startle. "Did you eat your lunch today?" The little girl's gaze didn't lift. She gave a tiny shrug, eyes fixed on the torn corner of her drawing pad. "I couldn't," she mumbled. Mrs. Parker took a step closer, crouching near her desk. "Why not, sweetie?" Emily's thumb found a loose thread in her skirt and rolled it between her fingers. Did Brenda say—" Mrs. Parker softened her tone further. "Did she tell you not to eat?" "She says food is for good kids." Emily's voice was almost a whisper. "And I wasn't today." Silence stretched. Mrs. Parker felt something twist deep in her chest. She didn't press further, not yet. Instead, she followed Emily's gaze down to the notebook lying open on the desk. Dark scribbles filled the page. Thick, chaotic strokes in black crayon, shapes of crooked walls, stick figures surrounded by looming shadows. At the center, a small child with hollow circles for eyes, arms raised, boxed in. "You've been drawing a lot lately," Mrs. Parker said softly. Emily nodded, still without looking up. "It helps." When she reached to close the notebook, Emily moved too quickly. The spiral binding caught on the edge of the desk, and the notebook spilled to the floor, pages fanning out like dropped feathers. Mrs. Parker knelt to help gather them, but one page made her hand still. It was another shadow, this time more defined. A tall figure holding something, thick like a belt, raised high above the child's head. The strokes were violent, the page torn slightly where the pressure had been heaviest. She looked up. "Emily, who is this?" The little girl snatched the page back with a gasp, clutching it to her chest. Her shoulders were trembling. I have to go," she stammered, shoving the notebook into her backpack. Her hands shook as she zipped it. Mrs. Parker tried to stay calm. "Emily, wait. Just a minute, please." But the child was already halfway to the door. "Emily." She turned slightly, the light catching something near her temple. A faint line, a small scar, pale against her skin. Mrs. Parker took a quiet breath. "You can trust me." But Emily only shook her head. "I can't be late. Uncle Todd gets mad." She was gone before Mrs. Parker could find the right words. At the classroom window, the teacher watched her cross the yard, small and quick, her backpack bouncing unevenly. Emily slowed when she reached the gate. A faded red sedan sat parked at the curb. Rust laced its edges. The engine idled low and impatient. Todd Miller stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, face pinched with annoyance. He didn't notice Mrs. Parker watching from the classroom, or maybe he didn't care. His voice echoed across the nearly empty lot. "How many times do I have to tell you not to keep me waiting?" Emily flinched. "Sorry, Mrs. Parker wanted—" "Don't care." He yanked open the rear door. "Get in." Mrs. Parker's nails pressed into her palm. Emily obeyed without another word. The door slammed shut behind her. The car jerked forward, its tires spitting gravel as it pulled away. Long after the tail lights vanished, Mrs. Parker remained at the window. She knew something was wrong. She had known for weeks, maybe longer. The bruises, the shadows in Emily's drawings, the uneaten lunches, the fear in her voice. But knowing wasn't proof, and proof was what the district needed. She'd reported once. The case had been closed within days. Insufficient evidence. It wasn't enough to be suspicious. The system wanted certainty. Yet, that notebook. She turned back to the desk and gently picked it up from where Emily had left it. The page, with the belt drawing, was gone. But the rest remained, fear etched in wax and paper. She closed it, laid it gently atop her own lesson planner. Outside, the buses were gone. The playground was quiet. A gust of wind danced across the hopscotch squares, lifting leaves into the air like small, desperate hands reaching upward. Mrs. Parker folded her arms tightly around herself. Tomorrow, she thought, tomorrow I'll try again. Maplewood Avenue was quiet at night, but not peaceful. The porch lights of modest single-story homes cast long shadows on cracked driveways, where weeds crept through seams like quiet invaders. The Miller house sat at the end of the block. Its siding faded, one shutter hanging crooked, and the front yard barren, save for a rusted lawn chair tipped on its side. Inside, the air felt dense, like something unseen was pressing against the walls. The kitchen light flickered overhead, a dying bulb Todd refused to replace. The silence was brittle, only broken by the occasional creak of floorboards and the distant hum of traffic somewhere beyond the neighborhood. Emily sat on the edge of the couch, hands in her lap, feet tucked close, trying to shrink herself. The denim of her school skirt was stiff under her palms. Her backpack rested on the floor beside her, unopened. From the next room, voices. "I swear to God, Brenda." Todd's voice was low but sharp, like a fraying rope just before it snaps. "That damn site laid me off again, said I missed too many days." "You did miss days," Brenda replied flatly. The way she spoke, it was like someone commenting on the weather, indifferent, tired. "I was sick." Brenda didn't argue. She stood near the fridge, arms crossed, watching Todd pace like a caged dog. "So what now?" she asked. "We can't keep feeding 3 mouths off my night shifts." Todd didn't answer. His boots thudded against the vinyl floor, back and forth. Then he stopped. "That teacher's getting too nosy," he said after a pause. Brenda's tone shifted, tighter. "The Parker woman?" She's sniffing around again. Asked Emily about lunch, about her drawings. His voice thickened with contempt. "She needs to learn where her line ends." Brenda glanced toward the living room, her eyes narrowing. "That little girl, if she slips up, says the wrong thing." She trailed off, but the weight in her voice hung there. Todd's jaw clenched. He reached for his belt, not to wear it, but to show it. Thick leather, worn, coiled. He stepped into the living room. Emily's eyes jumped to the object in his hand, then back down to the floor. She didn't blink. Todd didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "You keeping quiet, kid?" Emily nodded, small and quick. "You remember what happens when you don't, right?" Her fingers tightened around the bracelet on her wrist, a small, faded band of woven threads, almost lost in the sleeve of her cardigan. Her mother's. She never took it off. "Yes, sir." Todd stared at her for a second longer, then let the belt rest across the arm of the couch, like a quiet promise. He turned back toward the kitchen. "She knows," he muttered to Brenda. "She won't talk." Brenda lit a cigarette, her back against the sink. She better not. Upstairs, the house was dim and silent, but one floor below, in the cool, concrete-walled basement, someone else was listening. Mrs. Alvarez sat in a chair beside her makeshift altar, a small wooden shelf with a flickering votive candle, a photo of a young boy back in El Salvador, and a rosary curled neatly in her hands. "Santa Maria, Madre de Dios," she whispered, eyes closed, lips barely moving. The floor above groaned as Todd stomped away. Then came the hollow thump of the bedroom door shutting. Only then did Mrs. Alvarez rise, slow and aching, to move toward the narrow basement window. The shadows above shifted. She could see just a sliver of the hallway light through the crack under the floorboards. She had seen the girl before, Emily, during the brief hours Brenda was asleep after her shift, and Todd had left for the day. The child would sometimes sneak downstairs, her eyes red, face hollow. Mrs. Alvarez had offered her pieces of toast, half bananas, soup from the night before. Emily always whispered, "Thank you," with a kind of politeness that hurt to hear in someone so small. She knew what was happening in that house. But what could she do? She had no papers, no voice here. Todd had reminded her once, standing at the top of the stairs, silhouetted in the doorway. "You make noise," he said. "Ice gets a call. And you go back. Easy." Mrs. Alvarez had nodded, but that didn't mean she stopped listening. Above, Emily climbed the narrow stairs to her room, if it could be called that. The door didn't close all the way. The single bulb flickered when the heater kicked on. Her bed was an old cot, its metal frame bent, mattress thin enough to feel every spring. She didn't change. She didn't brush her teeth. She lay down fully clothed, clutching the worn blanket around her like armor. Her fingers curled again around the bracelet. She rubbed one thread between her thumb and forefinger over and over. Her mother had tied it around her wrist on her 5th birthday. "For strength, baby," her mum had whispered. "And for love, always." Emily closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. Not yet. Below her, Mrs. Alvarez whispered another Hail Mary, and somewhere deep inside that house, fear settled in like a draft through the floorboards, unseen, cold, and patient. Before we get into the next part, I would love to know what you are eating while watching. The light inside Mrs. Parker's home office was soft and steady, a lone lamp casting golden halos across the cluttered desk. Outside, the neighborhood slept under a blanket of quiet, porch lights blinking like slow heartbeats across Maple Hill. The ticking of an old clock echoed faintly through the walls, as if measuring each moment of stillness with care. Mrs. Parker sat hunched at her desk, still in her work clothes, though her shoes had long been kicked off beneath the chair. A lukewarm cup of tea rested on the coaster beside her, untouched. The edge of a manila folder was creased from the grip of her thumb. Across its cover, a small white label read, "Green, Emily, Grade 1. She flipped it open. There wasn't much, just the basics. Birth date, emergency contacts, attendance logs, notes from the counselor dated over a year ago, from the first weeks Emily had enrolled at Hillside. Nothing alarming, nothing official. She scanned the intake sheet again, eyes pausing on one sentence. Parental status, deceased. Cause, residential fire. She exhaled through her nose, slow and tired. No known relatives besides Brenda and Todd Miller, listed as guardians. The approval had gone through without question. No home visits required after initial placement. Emily had started school 3 weeks later. Mrs. Parker rubbed the bridge of her nose. The ache between her eyes was familiar now, an old friend that arrived around the same time as the late-night file reviews. Why wasn't there more? Why had no one followed up? She whispered aloud, not expecting an answer. How does a child lose both parents, end up in a house like that, and no one checks? The silence, as always, didn't argue. Her fingers lingered near the photograph stapled to the corner of the file. the school portrait from this year. Emily sat stiffly in front of a cloudy blue backdrop, her smile thin, the corners of her mouth barely turned. There was a spot near her temple, almost hidden by her hair. At first glance it looked like a shadow, but Mrs. Parker had seen it up close. A scar. According to Todd, she'd bumped her head on the edge of the desk during math. According to Emily, she'd forgotten. The story always changed, depending on who asked. But the eyes in the photo said more than either of them ever had. She reached for her planner, flipping through pages filled with red pen and sticky notes. There, last Monday's note. Emily didn't eat lunch. Drew disturbing images again. Large figure, child hiding. Must monitor. The word monitor felt hollow now. She pushed the file aside and leaned back in her chair, letting her eyes wander to the ceiling. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs was the only noise. A memory surfaced earlier that morning when Emily dropped her notebook and scrambled to gather the pages. How quickly she'd moved, how tightly she'd clutched that one drawing to her chest. Mrs. Parker had seen it. She wasn't imagining it. A man, tall, looming, standing over a small child, hand raised, a belt slashing through the air in black crayon. She had reported once, nearly 3 months ago. She remembered the conversation with Principal Hewitt vividly. "We can't move forward without concrete signs," he had said, fingers folded across his desk like a bureaucratic gatekeeper. "We have a protocol for a reason. We can't accuse a family based on suggestion or suspicion." "And what if we're wrong in the other direction?" she had asked. "What if we wait and something happens?" He had only sighed, as though she were naive. Back at her desk now, Mrs. Parker opened her bottom drawer. Inside were dozens of folders, just like Emily's, files she reviewed when sleep didn't come. Most had little red flags she couldn't ignore. But hers was different, not louder, quieter, the kind of suffering that sat still and silent and learned how not to be seen. She pulled out her journal, the worn, leather-bound notebook where she recorded more than just academic notes. This was where she wrote the things the system didn't have space for. She flipped past pages filled with observations, reflections, and sleepless thoughts. She reached a blank page and clicked her pen. At the top, she wrote, "Emily, day 61. Then, slowly, "There's a line between what I'm allowed to do and what I know is right. Tonight, I sat on the wrong side of it again. She's trying to hold it together, but her eyes betray her. That little scar isn't from a desk. That drawing isn't a story. It's a memory." She paused, staring at the words, letting the weight of them settle. Then added, "Tomorrow, I'll ask her again. She may not say it, but her eyes will." She closed the journal softly, her fingers lingering on the cover. The clock ticked on. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and fell quiet again. The heater clicked, then sighed as warm air pushed gently through the vents. Mrs. Parker stood, her legs stiff. She crossed the room to her window and looked out toward the dark rows of houses. Somewhere in one of them, a little girl was lying awake, tracing threads on a bracelet and pretending not to be afraid. Mrs. Parker pressed her palm flat against the cold glass. "Just a little more time," she whispered. "Hold on." The sun was bleeding out behind the trees as Gregory Blake turned onto the wrong street for the third time. Tall oaks lined the road like silent judges, their branches clawing at the sky while the early evening pressed heavy against his windshield. His GPS spun in circles, recalculating with the same indifferent calm it had all afternoon. He sighed and pulled to the curb, the engine idling with a quiet growl. A bead of sweat clung to the side of his temple despite the cool outside air. He reached into the passenger seat for his water bottle hands stiff from the tension in his neck and shoulders. "You should slow down, Greg," his cardiologist had warned last fall. "Your heart's not 25 anymore." But slowing down had never been his strength. Not when Rachel died. Not when the company exploded overnight. Not even when his life became more interviews than real conversations. And now, here he was, a millionaire with nowhere in particular to be, but still rushing from habit. The GPS chirped again. Make a legal U-turn. He was about to do just that when he heard it. A sharp cry. Not the aimless shout of a kid playing. No laughter followed. Just a voice, small, cracking, punctuated by something darker. "Uncle Todd, please, I'm sorry. Don't..." Gregory froze. The voice came from just up the block. He turned off the engine. Another sound now. A man, shouting. No words, just raw, ugly volume. Then a motion. Across the sidewalk, two figures. A man yanking a child by the arm, her feet stumbling to keep up. The man, broad, red-faced, raised something in his hand. Gregory's chest tightened when he saw what it was. A belt. He was out of the car before he realized he'd opened the door. "Hey!" His voice cut across the dusk. Strong, commanding. The kind of voice that once held courtrooms and boardrooms captive. "Let her go. Now." The man turned, confused at first, then irritated. "This doesn't concern you," he snapped, still gripping the child's wrist. Gregory walked closer, slowly. Controlled. The child, a girl, maybe 6, had her face turned away, hair tangled and caught in her mouth, eyes wet. Her free hand clutched something at her side. A bracelet? "I said let her go," Gregory repeated. "You're hurting her." "I'm her legal guardian," the man growled. "You got no idea what's going on here. So unless you want trouble, I suggest you walk away." Gregory stopped, 10 feet away. He didn't yell. He didn't posture. He simply reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. "Good. Then you won't mind explaining it to the police." The man's jaw shifted. Gregory didn't waver. He dialed. 911. "What's your emergency?" "Yes," Gregory said, eyes still locked on the man. "I'm witnessing a man physically threatening a child on Maplewood Avenue near the corner of Chestnut. The child appears terrified. He's holding a belt in his hand." Todd's eyes flared. "You son of a..." "Don't," Gregory cut him off, voice like steel. "One more step and you'll be on camera too." The girl hadn't moved. Her eyes flicked up, wide, uncertain, and found Gregory's. She didn't speak, but something in her posture changed. Not relief, not yet, but recognition. Like she'd seen something rare, someone who stayed. Todd let go of her wrist. The red imprint left behind said everything. "I didn't touch her," he barked. Gregory raised an eyebrow. "She didn't fall down those stairs either, right?" Todd clenched his fists, but took a step back. From down the street, a screen door slammed. A neighbor had stepped out, then another. Curious faces appearing behind windows. The air had shifted. Todd saw it too. "Don't think this is over," he hissed toward the girl, then turned and stalked toward the red sedan, parked crookedly at the curb. The girl stayed rooted in place, arms wrapped around herself. Gregory stepped closer, kneeling slightly to her level. He didn't reach for her. He just waited. "I'm Gregory," he said gently. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer. "That man, is he your uncle?" She nodded once. "Do you have anyone else? Anyone who takes care of you?" Another nod. Then a whisper. "My teacher, Mrs. Parker." Gregory's jaw tightened. He looked down at the marks on her wrist, then back up at her. "I'm going to stay here with you until the police come," he said. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. But you're safe now. I promise." The little girl's mouth opened, then closed again. Her fingers twisted around the thread bracelet on her wrist, fraying, faded. He recognized that kind of grip, the way people held on to memories when nothing else made sense. Blue and red lights turned onto the street minutes later, the flashing glow washing the sidewalk in urgency. As the first officer stepped out of the cruiser, Gregory stood up slowly and met him halfway. "I'm the one who called. There's a little girl here. She needs help." The officer glanced past him, saw the girl, saw her wrist, saw enough. As questions began and the neighbors stepped farther onto porches, Gregory looked back once more. The wind picked up slightly, tugging at the leaves on the sidewalk. A small hand reached out and took hold of his coat for just a second, then let go. The last of the sun had dipped below the rooftops, casting long shadows across Maplewood Avenue. Porch lights blinked to life, hesitant at first, then steady, revealing curious silhouettes behind half-open blinds. The air was thick with a stillness that only arrives when something is about to break. Gregory stood still, hand resting lightly on Emily's shoulder as the first officer stepped forward. His other hand curled unconsciously at his side, thumb running a slow circle across the edge of his palm. An old habit. The girl didn't move, her face half hidden by strands of hair, her eyes locked on the gravel at her feet. And then she looked up. Gregory met her gaze, and something in his chest cracked open. Rachel. The memory hit him like a jolt. Not the photograph version, not the grainy face in frames he kept hidden in drawers, but the real one, alive, trembling, 11 years old and silent, standing in a foster center hallway as two state workers held his arms back. She hadn't cried that day. She just stared at him as they took her away, and he'd screamed. He'd screamed like something wild, pulled apart. Now, here she was, again. Not Rachel, of course, but those same eyes, the same fear, the same apology, carved into silence. The patrol car door slammed behind them as the second officer approached. Todd Miller was standing a few yards away, arms flailing, his voice rising with desperation. "This is out of hand. I didn't hit her. I disciplined her, that's all. She talks back, she lies, and no one sees what she does to us." Brenda had emerged from the house by then, her robe clutched tightly around her, mascara smudged under her eyes. She started toward them, voice shrill. "We've done everything for that child. Everything. I work double shifts. That little brat doesn't respect." Gregory stepped forward. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through both of them like glass. "You don't get to use exhaustion as an excuse for cruelty." Brenda blinked. "Excuse me? You're tired? Fine. You're broke? That's real. But don't confuse being poor with being evil." Todd scoffed. "You don't know a damn thing about us." Gregory's voice dropped into something colder. "I know what fear looks like on a child's face." The officer beside him nodded slightly, then turned toward Brenda and Todd. "Step back, both of you. We'll ask the questions now." Emily stayed close to Gregory, but her hands began to twitch at her sides, pulling at the sleeves of her cardigan. Her fingers crept down to her wrist, brushing against the threadbare bracelet again and again. The crowd had grown. Maplewood was never noisy, but neighbors had stepped out onto porches, leaning over railings. Whispers floated through the air like restless leaves. Gregory could feel it all building, the fragile tension of a street, watching something it had long ignored. Todd turned toward the cluster of onlookers. "This is bull. You all think you're better than us? She's our niece. You think some rich guy with a shiny coat knows what's best for her?" Gregory didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice, but his words came like stone. "Money doesn't make someone better," he said, "but decency does, and decency is what you forgot." A small, running figure appeared at the end of the sidewalk. "Emily!" It was Mrs. Parker. She had come fast, no coat, just a cardigan thrown over her blouse, shoes barely tied. She slowed when she reached them, her breath catching. When her eyes landed on Emily, she dropped to her knees. "Oh, honey, are you—" Her voice broke, and she pulled the girl into her arms. Emily didn't speak, but she didn't resist. Mrs. Parker held her tighter. "I've been so worried," she whispered. So worried." Gregory stood back, letting the teacher hold her student. His throat ached. He looked away toward the porch of the Miller house, where Brenda stood with her arms folded and her mouth drawn into a bitter line. "She fell," Brenda called out weakly, as if still auditioning for someone's benefit. "She always falls. You can ask the school." "No one's asking you," the officer said sharply, turning back to Emily. "We'll need to take the girl in for observation," he told Gregory and Mrs. Parker quietly. "Standard protocol. She'll be with Child Protective Services for now, but if there are concerns about her guardianship, they'll evaluate the home." Gregory nodded. "She can stay with me tonight. I'll take full responsibility. My lawyer can coordinate with your department." The officer raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" Gregory reached into his coat. "Gregory Blake, Blake Foundation. We fund 3 of your city's shelters." The officer blinked, glanced at his partner, then back at Emily, now curled against Mrs. Parker's side. "We'll confirm that. But I don't think she should go back in that house tonight." "No," Mrs. Parker said, eyes fierce and wet. "She shouldn't." Gregory extended a hand toward Emily. She looked at it for a long moment, not suspicious, just uncertain. Then, slowly, she reached out. Her fingers were small, trembling, but steady. She placed them in his palm. He didn't squeeze, just held. Mrs. Parker let go, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's forehead. "You're okay, sweetheart. You're safe." Gregory started walking her toward his car. The door was already open. She paused at the edge of the seat, glancing back. For a second, her face turned toward Brenda and Todd, still surrounded by uniformed officers and murmuring neighbors. Then she turned back to Gregory and smiled. It wasn't wide, it wasn't bright, but it was real. And for Gregory Blake, for the first time in 27 years, it felt like he had done something right, something that couldn't be undone. The waiting room of the Child Welfare Center smelled faintly of old carpet and hand sanitizer. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, washing the pale walls in a sterile glow that did little to warm the space. Gregory sat in a rigid plastic chair, one hand resting on his knee, the other hovering just above Emily's back. Not touching, but close. Emily sat beside him, small and still, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her shoes didn't reach the floor. She rocked them gently, back and forth, scuffing the toes in a slow rhythm. Across from them stood Mr. Jenkins, clipboard in hand, posture stiff. "I understand your concern, Mr. Blake," he said, adjusting his glasses, "but emergency custody requires approval. Temporary placement needs to go through protocol." "She's not staying in that house tonight," Gregory said, voice calm but solid. "That's not up for debate." "I'm not debating that," Jenkins replied. "I'm just doing my job." The door opened behind them. "I believe my job is to make sure this child gets somewhere safe," came a new voice, measured, cool, with just enough sharpness to demand attention. Miss Alvarez entered, leather satchel tucked under her arm. Sleek grey suit, low heels, calm fire. "Carmen Alvarez," she said, handing Jenkins a card. "Attorney for Mr. Blake. Emergency petition for temporary custody filed as of 10 minutes ago. Your fax machine should be warming up about now." Jenkins frowned, but took the card. "This is very fast." "Money helps," Alvarez said dryly. "So does urgency." Gregory glanced at Emily, who still hadn't moved. He lowered his voice. "If we spend all night here, she'll fall asleep thinking she's still alone." Jenkins looked between them, then sighed. Fine, but I'll be checking with your agency contacts tomorrow morning. Of course, Alvarez said smoothly. We welcome oversight. The process moved faster after that. Papers signed, temporary documents issued. Gregory provided everything: license, background clearance, proof of residence, even letters from his foundation's board. Emily said nothing through it all. An hour later, they stood outside beneath a violet sky, streetlights humming to life above them. Gregory opened the passenger door of his car. You want to sit up front or back? Emily hesitated, then climbed in front without a word, sliding into the seat and immediately curling toward the window. She didn't ask where they were going. He didn't tell her. They drove in silence, the hum of tires on asphalt, the only sound for miles. After a few minutes, Gregory reached over and turned the heater up slightly. If you're cold, just say so, he offered, or hungry. I'm not, came the whisper. Then a pause. I just like looking out. Gregory glanced at her. Her forehead pressed gently to the window, fingers tracing the condensation. It makes me feel not stuck. He nodded, eyes back on the road. That makes sense. She didn't say anything else. When they arrived, the house stood quiet and dimly lit from within. The porch light glowed gold, casting soft edges across the front steps. Gregory opened the door and motioned her inside. Emily paused in the threshold. Her shoes barely brushed the welcome mat. The warmth hit first, subtle but unfamiliar, the kind that came from somewhere being lived in, not just occupied. Inside, the hallway opened into a wide space with worn wooden floors and books lining the walls. Soft jazz played faintly from a speaker tucked near the fireplace. Gregory knelt beside her. You don't have to call me anything if you don't want to, he said quietly. But if you'd like, you can call me Greg. She looked up at him, eyes uncertain but watching. Then she stepped forward. He showed her the guest room, down the hall, just off the kitchen. Nothing extravagant. A small bed with a patchwork quilt, a dresser, a nightlight already glowing in the corner. She walked the perimeter of the room slowly. When she reached the bed, she stopped, looking at it for a long time. You can sleep there, or... I want to be near the light. Gregory blinked. Of course. She dropped her backpack on the floor, then sat down beside the wall under the nightlight, curling her knees to her chest. He didn't stop her. Instead, he pulled a throw pillow from the bed and placed it near her feet. If you change your mind, it's your bed. The whole thing. Emily nodded, tracing the glow of the nightlight with her eyes. A beat passed. Then she spoke, softer than before. Who's that girl in the picture? Gregory followed her gaze to a framed photo on the dresser. A young girl with long dark hair, laughing mid-spin in the grass. That's Rachel, he said after a moment. She was my sister. She looks like she was nice. She was. Another pause. Did she go away too? Gregory's throat tightened. Yes, he said gently, but not because she wanted to. Emily looked down at the bracelet on her wrist, then back up at him. Okay, she whispered, and for the first time since the night began, her body softened just a little, as though she'd let go of something invisible. Gregory stood. I'll leave the door open, he said. I'll be just down the hall. As he reached the doorway, her voice came one last time. Thank you, Greg. He turned. She wasn't looking at him, but she didn't need to. Her words had found their mark. The moonlight filtered softly through the guest room window, casting pale stripes across the floorboards and the edge of the small bed. The nightlight in the corner glowed amber, its quiet hum steady, constant, like a presence rather than a fixture. Outside, wind rustled faintly through tree limbs, but inside, The world held its breath. Emily couldn't sleep. She sat cross-legged beneath the nightlight, a throw pillow behind her back, the patchwork quilt draped over her legs like a shield. In her lap, she held one of Gregory's throw cushions, hugged tightly, her chin resting on top of it. The bed was untouched. She had tried earlier, stretching out for a few seconds. But the silence up there felt too loud, too open. Here, under the nightlight, the shadows didn't stretch as far. They couldn't creep in. Across the room sat her backpack, slumped against the dresser. Inside, tucked between pages of her old drawing pad, was a fresh piece of paper. A new picture. She had drawn it quietly when Gregory left. Her with a round face, a thread bracelet visible, holding the hand of a taller figure near a house with yellow light in every window. She hadn't signed it. She wasn't sure yet if it was real enough. Her eyes drifted toward the photo again. The girl, Rachel. Her smile seemed too big for the frame. Emily didn't know much about ghosts, but she wondered if sometimes they stayed, not because they were trapped, but because someone still needed them. She tilted her head. "I think I would have liked her," she whispered. Then she looked at the ceiling. "Mum," she murmured, so quietly it barely touched the air. "I'm okay tonight." A pause. "I think I'm okay." She shifted and pulled the quilt tighter, cheek pressing into the soft curve of the cushion. Her fingers curled around her bracelet. I think you'd like him. He doesn't talk too much, and he doesn't make me scared, even when he's quiet." Her voice cracked, just once. "I miss you, but I think I'm not so stuck now." In the hallway, Gregory stood still, back resting gently against the wall just outside the door. He hadn't meant to listen. He had only come to check, to make sure she was still warm, still safe, still there. But when he heard her voice, small, hushed, directed somewhere far beyond the room, he didn't move. He closed his eyes. And for the first time in a long time, his chest ached in a way that wasn't fear or regret, just deep, fragile hope. He took a slow breath and turned, quietly walking back toward the kitchen. There, a lamp glowed over the stovetop, and an older woman in a navy cardigan stirred a small pot on the burner. "Still awake?" Eleanor asked, not looking up. "She's not in bed," Gregory said softly. "She's on the floor, under the light. She'll move when she's ready." Eleanor poured warm milk into a mug with practiced hands, then slid it across the counter. Rachel used to do the same thing. That corner makes them feel tucked in. Gregory nodded, but said nothing. Eleanor glanced at him now. "You still calling Dr. Wells tomorrow?" "First thing," he replied. "I don't want to waste time." "She won't need a file. She'll need consistency." "I know." Eleanor washed the pot slowly. "She came into the kitchen earlier, didn't say a word, just stood by the fridge until I turned the light on." Gregory looked toward the hallway. "Did she say anything to you?" "One thing," Eleanor said. She reached for a dish towel. "She asked if I knew what kind of cereal Rachel liked." Gregory exhaled, half laugh, half breath. "Did you tell her?" "Of course. The frosted kind with marshmallows. Then I told her we still have some." Gregory smiled, almost. "She smiled too," Eleanor said, folding the towel. "Barely, but it counted." Gregory picked up the mug of milk and stepped back toward the hallway. "Leave the door open," Eleanor called after him gently. "I always do." Back at the room, he paused in the doorway. Emily was asleep now, or close to it, her body curled on her side, arms wrapped around the cushion. The nightlight bathed her in gold. A quiet sort of peace rested on her face, thin but real. He set the milk on the nightstand beside the untouched bed and crouched beside the doorway, just close enough to see her breathe. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. But as he turned to go, Emily stirred, eyes still closed. "Greg?" He froze. "Yeah?" "Can the light stay on?" He smiled, throat tight. "It'll never go off." Morning light spilled through the wide windows of Hillside Elementary's art room, catching dust motes in slow, deliberate dance. Colored paper and brushes lay scattered across tables, the faint smell of glue and crayon clinging to the air. Outside, the schoolyard buzzed with children's voices, but inside, it was quieter, gentler. Emily sat near the back, close to the window. Her paper lay untouched in front of her, a blank canvas she didn't feel rushed to fill. She was watching the way the sunlight hit the floor, how it stretched across the wood like it was trying to touch her shoes. "Hey," a soft voice came from beside her. "That bird you drew yesterday, it looked like it wanted to fly through the page." Emily turned. Grace, a girl with freckles and a ponytail that bounced when she walked, was looking at her with genuine interest. She held up her own drawing, an oddly shaped cat wearing a crown. Emily smiled faintly. "Your cat looks like it rules the world." Grace beamed. "She does. Her name's Captain Marshmallow." Emily let out a tiny laugh, her first real one in days. Miss Carter, the art teacher, moved through the classroom with her usual warmth, pausing at their table. She crouched beside Emily, not too close. "You don't have to draw anything in particular today," she said softly. "Sometimes it helps to draw what you wish could be true, not what already happened." Emily looked down at the blank page, then slowly picked up a green crayon. She didn't start with a person. She started with a door. Later, back at Gregory's house, the late afternoon sun slanted through the front window, hitting the floor in warm streaks. Gregory sat on the living room couch, thumbing through a book, the edges worn from rereading. He didn't notice the knock at first. When he opened the door, Mrs. Parker stood there, holding a paper bag and a smile that looked more tired than she let on. "Thought I'd bring something," she said. "I wasn't sure if Emily liked oatmeal raisin, but they're soft." "She'll appreciate the thought," Gregory said, stepping aside. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon. Eleanor must have baked again. Emily was in the dining room, her backpack already discarded in the hallway. She was bent over her sketch pad, tongue slightly poking out in concentration. Mrs. Parker's eyes softened. "She's drawing." "She hasn't stopped," Gregory said. "She drew on the car ride home. She even taped one to the fridge." They stood in the doorway a moment, watching her. "I didn't think I'd see that look on her face again," Mrs. Parker murmured. "Whatever you're doing, it's working." "I'm not doing much," Gregory said. "I leave the light on. I listen when she talks. Sometimes, I just sit nearby." Mrs. Parker nodded. "Sometimes, that's more than enough." Emily looked up then, seeing her teacher, and offered a shy wave. Mrs. Parker waved back. "I should let you two get back to your afternoon," she said quietly. "Just wanted to say thank you." "Thank you for not giving up," Gregory replied. She paused before the door. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." "Does she talk about them? About the Millers?" Gregory shook his head. Not yet. I think she's still deciding whether this is real." Mrs. Parker smiled gently. "Maybe it's not about forgetting. Maybe it's about replacing." As she left, Emily came over with her sketch pad. She didn't say anything, just placed it on Gregory's lap. He looked down. A drawing of a door, bright green, open wide. Inside, the space beyond glowed yellow, and two figures stood at the threshold, one tall, one small. Their hands were linked. Off to the side, in the corner of the frame, stood an older woman in a shawl, palms together, as if mid-prayer. Gregory studied the image, quiet. Emily shifted beside him. "I think this is what home looks like now," she said. He looked at her, something heavy but soft in his chest. It looks beautiful. Grace had asked her earlier, "Who's that lady near the door?" Emily had answered without hesitation. "She's not my grandma," she'd said. "She's the one who kept praying, even when no one was listening." Now, she picked up her pencil again and added one more detail. A bird perched on top of the door frame, wings slightly spread, head turned to the sky. Gregory said nothing, but he stayed seated beside her until the sun dipped low, the drawing catching the last of the light like a dream waiting to come true. The precinct smelled of paper, coffee, and something metallic, like dust caught in metal file cabinets. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making every sound feel too sharp. A clock ticked somewhere just out of sight, too slow, too loud. Mrs. Alvarez sat in a hard plastic chair across from Officer Ramirez, her hands clenched in her lap. Her shawl, an old faded one with pale blue embroidery, was folded neatly around her shoulders like armor. She hadn't taken it off since they entered the station. Gregory sat beside her, his expression quiet but steady. Mrs. Parker was across the room, reading over the translated affidavit with a red pen, making sure every detail was clear. No embellishments, a just truth. Ramirez leaned forward, speaking gently in Spanish. "Señora Alvarez, lo que está haciendo hoy es importante, muy valiente. What you're doing today is important, very brave." Mrs. Alvarez nodded slowly. "Durante meses, yo escuchaba." For months. I listened. She glanced toward the door. "But I never spoke." Ramirez waited. Gregory spoke softly. "What changed?" Mrs. Alvarez looked down. A little girl drew a door, and she drew me inside it. Her voice cracked. "I never thought I'd be in anyone's home again, not really, but she drew me inside." Ramirez nodded. "And now, you're helping her open that door for real." Mrs. Alvarez began to speak again, slowly, describing the screams she heard from the floor above, the sound of belts, of silence, of muffled cries, of small footsteps that never ran. Mrs. Parker slid the Spanish transcript in front of her. "If you're comfortable, we'll file this today," she said gently. "It won't undo the past, but it can protect her future." Mrs. Alvarez took the pen. Her hand shook, but she signed. Later, in the hallway just outside the station lobby, Emily waited on a bench with a small paper bag clutched in her lap. Eleanor had packed it, grapes and crackers and a juice box, just in case. Gregory sat beside her, not speaking. Emily looked up as Mrs. Alvarez stepped out. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Emily stood. She walked forward slowly, bag still in hand. Mrs. Alvarez knelt, her old knees trembling. "I'm sorry, Mija," she whispered, voice low, rough with guilt. I prayed, but I stayed silent too long." Emily studied her face. Then she asked quietly, "Did you really pray for me?" Mrs. Alvarez's eyes welled. "Every night," she said. "I said your name aloud, even when no one was listening." Emily hesitated. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. She handed it over. A drawing. A house with light in every window. A small girl holding the hand of a tall man. Off to the side, a woman in a shawl standing just inside the door. "I put you in this one too," Emily said. Mrs. Alvarez pressed the paper to her chest, then leaned forward and gently hugged the girl. No one spoke for a while. Later, Gregory met with Ms. Alvarez, his lawyer, at a nearby coffee shop to discuss the paperwork. "She qualifies," Ms. Alvarez confirmed. "She can apply for humanitarian parole. Witness protection may also assist." Gregory nodded. "We'll cover it." Ms. Alvarez raised an eyebrow. "You always jump in like this?" He sipped his coffee. "Not always. Just when it matters." Across the street, Mrs. Parker sat beside Mrs. Alvarez in the waiting area, while they finalized the documentation. The older woman's hands trembled, but her spine was straight. "I should have said something sooner," she murmured. Mrs. Parker's gaze stayed on the floor. "So should I." They were quiet for a moment. Then Mrs. Parker said, "I used to think I needed permission to act. Turns out I just needed to act." Mrs. Alvarez nodded. "Sometimes silence is a safer language, but safety is not the same as peace." Back at Gregory's home, Emily was sitting by the fireplace with Grace. The two girls were cutting colored paper, chatting softly. Eleanor brought them cocoa and left them alone. Emily was folding another sheet. This time, she used soft orange for the walls and blue for the sky. The door in the drawing was wide open. There were more people inside now. Gregory, Mrs. Parker, Grace, Eleanor, and, near the kitchen window, a woman with a shawl and kind eyes. No one was left outside anymore. When she finished, she taped the new picture to the fridge just below the green door drawing. She stepped back, looked at both for a while, then smiled. Not big, not wide, but real. The courtroom was colder than it needed to be. Wooden pews lined the walls like a silent audience, polished but uninviting. Above the judge's bench, a round clock ticked steadily, louder somehow in the hush of the room. Emily sat between Gregory and Mrs. Parker, her small hands folded neatly in her lap, thumb tracing the edge of her bracelet. She didn't look toward the defense table. She hadn't all morning. Todd and Brenda sat there, separate now, each flanked by attorneys. Todd stared straight ahead, jaw tight, arms stiff. Brenda, pale and fidgeting, glanced back toward Emily once, quickly, before looking down at her folded hands. The judge adjusted his glasses. "We'll begin with the witness statements." The prosecutor, Elaine Torres, stood with calm efficiency. "Your Honor, this case is not built on bruises alone, though there were many. It's not built on one child's drawings, though they tell a truth few words could. It is built on silence, on what was allowed to persist because no one stood soon enough. Until now." She nodded to the bailiff. Gregory rose and walked slowly to the front. He didn't wear a suit today. Just a dark sweater, clean jeans, and shoes still damp from morning frost. He looked not like a millionaire, but like a guardian. A man trying to do right. He faced the judge, then turned slightly toward the courtroom. "When I found Emily, I didn't know her story. I only knew the look in her eyes. I'd seen it before, on my sister, the day she was taken from me." He paused. "Let it sit. Children don't need perfect people. They don't need wealth, or pedigrees, or cleverness. They need someone to choose them, someone to say, 'I see you, I believe you, and I will not look away.'" He looked at Brenda then, at Todd. She needed someone, and she had people who made her invisible instead. The judge nodded for him to return to his seat. Gregory did, slow and calm, his hand lightly resting on Emily's shoulder as he sat. The defense stood. Brenda's attorney stepped forward, adjusting her blouse, already softening her voice. "My client acknowledges that mistakes were made, but this is not a case of cruelty. It is one of hardship, poverty, stress, lack of education and resources. Mrs. Miller worked nights. Mr. Miller had unstable employment. They were overwhelmed." Brenda spoke then, unprompted. "We didn't hurt her the way they say. We just didn't know what else to do." She looked at the judge. "Nobody helped us either." A silence followed. It wasn't harsh, just quiet, full. Then the judge turned to Emily. "I understand she would like to speak." Mrs. Parker nodded gently, then turned to the girl beside her. Emily stood. Her knees were shaking slightly. Gregory gave her a small nod. "Take your time." She walked to the front. The bailiff brought over a step stool so she could reach the microphone. She didn't look at Todd. or Brenda? She looked at the judge. "I don't hate them," she said, voice small but steady. A beat. "But I don't want to go back." She looked down at her shoes. "I want to be somewhere kind." She didn't cry. She just nodded once, then returned to her seat. Gregory took her hand quietly. She gripped it tighter than usual. After the recess, Officer Ramirez spoke. Calm, neutral, but firm. "When I asked the child about the bruises, she didn't answer," he said. "She just flinched. That was all I needed to know." Mrs. Alvarez gave her testimony through a translator, her voice full of quiet regret. "I prayed for her," she said, "but I never spoke. I thought it would cost me everything. I didn't realize silence already had." The judge listened, took notes, read the psychologist's report, considered. Then came the ruling. Partial custody revoked. No visitation rights. Mandatory parenting rehabilitation for Brenda. Misdemeanor charges for neglect. Todd, however, faced felony child endangerment and unlawful corporal punishment. Sentence pending. Emily would remain with her current guardian, with permanent adoption proceedings to be discussed. Brenda cried, not loud, but real. Todd did not react. Emily squeezed Gregory's hand as they stood to leave. "Can we go home now?" she whispered. Gregory looked down at her. "We already are." Outside the courthouse, the wind was gentle. Autumn leaves circled at their feet like small dancers. Mrs. Parker stepped beside them, placing a hand on Emily's back. "You were very brave today," she said. Emily didn't answer, but she reached into her backpack and pulled out another drawing. She gave it to Gregory. A window this time, not a door. Wide open, with sunlight pouring through. A bird perched on the edge, wings raised. Below, a girl with open arms. Inside, silhouettes of familiar shapes. Books, a fireplace, and a couch with worn pillows. Gregory studied it. "There's no door in this one," he said. Emily shook her head. "I don't need one anymore." And she smiled. Bigger now. Still soft. The backyard had been swept clean for the occasion. Tulips lined the edge of the garden, their petals still shy but blooming, and colored paper streamers fluttered from the fence like soft laughter in the breeze. A table stood under the old oak tree, draped in a pastel cloth and scattered with paper cups, napkins, and a cake that shimmered with white frosting and 7 unlit candles. Emily turned 7 that day. She wore a yellow dress, one Eleanor had hemmed the week before, stitching a tiny blue bird on the left pocket. Her hair was tied with a green ribbon. She stood by the cake, hands fidgeting just beneath the tablecloth, her eyes scanning the group gathered around her. Grace was there, bouncing slightly on her heels, holding a folded card with glitter on it. Ms. Carter, the art teacher, had brought a small set of watercolor pencils. Mrs. Alvarez, now healthier and steadier, sat beside Eleanor near the porch, a soft smile tugging at her cheeks. And Mrs. Parker was by the lemonade jug, watching with misty eyes and a steady heart. Gregory stepped out from the house, carrying something wrapped in brown paper. He handed it to Emily with 2 hands, like it was made of glass. "Open it slowly," he said, "and maybe step back a little. It's big." Emily peeled away the wrapping, breath catching. It was her drawing, the first one she had ever shown him. The green door, the yellow light, the tall figure holding the hand of a small girl, now printed on canvas, framed in smooth maple, and signed at the bottom in small tidy lettering, E. Green, age 6. Everyone fell quiet as she stared at it. Gregory leaned closer, thought the house could use a bit more color. Emily turned to look up at him. "Where will we put it?" "I was thinking about the hallway, right where everyone walks past. But if you want it in your room..." Oh, she said quickly. I want it where people see." He smiled. "Then that's where it'll go." Later, when the cake had been cut and the candles blown out, her wish whispered into the frosting before anyone could guess. Emily brought Grace upstairs. She showed her the small corner beneath the nightlight, the place she used to sleep. "You used to sleep down there?" Grace asked, wide-eyed. Emily nodded. It felt safer. Back then. And now? Emily glanced at the bed, covered in a soft blue quilt. "Now I'm not scared of up there anymore." Downstairs, Mrs. Alvarez placed a small gift on the hallway table, a frame with a single embroidered phrase, "Siempre hay luz." Always, there is light. Gregory passed by and paused. "You made this?" Mrs. Alvarez nodded. "It's for her, but I thought, maybe it belongs near the painting." He looked at it for a long moment, then nodded. "I think that's exactly where it belongs." Out on the porch, Mrs. Parker joined him, holding 2 mugs of tea. She handed him one. "She's different now," she said. "She is," Gregory agreed, "but not because I fixed her." Mrs. Parker looked over her shoulder through the open door. "You didn't fix her. You just stayed." Gregory chuckled, low and honest. "I spent most of my life solving problems by paying people. This time, I just kept the light on." "She didn't need a father," Mrs. Parker said, glancing toward the laughter upstairs. "She needed someone who didn't leave." Gregory didn't answer. He didn't need to. Inside, Emily had come back down. She stopped at the hallway, where the framed drawing now hung just beneath the embroidery. She stood there, quiet for a while. Then Gregory joined her. She looked up at him. "I think this is my real house now." Gregory put a hand gently on her back. "It always was." She didn't say anything, but she smiled, openly, fully, and slipped her hand into his. In the garden behind them, the breeze stirred the tulips. The party continued in small waves of chatter and laughter, soft music drifting from the speakers Eleanor had set up. Somewhere, someone lit sparklers. Spring had arrived, not in grand gestures, but in steady warmth and light that lingered, at last, without asking for permission. And Emily, 7 years old, full of color and quiet courage, stood exactly where she was meant to be, home. What did you think of Emily's story? Did it move you the way it moved us? Let us know in the comments what lessons stood out to you most, whether it's the power of speaking up, the importance of paying attention, or how sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever.